As well as the Marines, Pegasus deployed the 1st Air Cavalry Division, the most mobile American unit in Vietnam. The Air Cavalry had more helicopters and airborne firepower than any other U.S. unit. It was perfectly suited to the rugged and demanding terrain near Khe Sanh. For Pegasus, the division's commander, Major General John Tolson, was also given the 1st Marine Regiment, a South Vietnamese airborne task force, and the 26th Marines in Khe Sanh. The entire length of Route 9 was still dominated by North Vietnamese Army units, especially elements of the 66th and 29th Regiments. For Operation Pegasus, the Americans built a main base for the air cavalry at Landing Zone Stud. The Marines would operate out of Ka Lu. The plan was for air assaults to seize landing zones and fire bases north and south of Route 9, while other forces pushed down the road. Although the weather was poor for fighter bombers, the weight of American firepower supporting Pegasus was still enormous. In a single day, the Americans fired more than 10,000 artillery rounds. Before the operation was over, B-52s launched 45 arc-light strikes. The American offensive was unstoppable. By April 5, 1968, the air cavalry had forged past Khe Sanh and established landing zones west and south of the combat base. While the cavalry consolidated their new positions, the Marines in Khe Sanh mounted their own breakout assaults. There was strong resistance from battalions of the North Vietnamese 66th Regiment, which mounted fierce counterattacks, but the Marines succeeded in taking Hill 471. It was the first of a string of NVA hills recaptured over the next few days. On April 8, 1968, the Air Cavalry and the 26th Marines at the combat base linked up, formally ending the siege of Khe Sanh. In fact, the Marines were less than pleased to be seen as being rescued by the Army. In their view, they had long since guaranteed their own survival. The 77-day siege of Khe Sanh had turned into the biggest single battle of the Vietnam War. The official assessment of the North Vietnamese Army dead was just over 1,600, with 2 divisions all but shattered. But thousands more were probably killed by bombs and left no trace of ever having existed. By the end of Operation Pegasus, American and South Vietnamese units had suffered 1,000 dead and 4,500 wounded. But official figures state that under 250 had been killed at the Khe Sanh combat base and its outposts. In the aftermath of the battle, General Westmoreland had high hopes that the next phase would be the thrust into Laos he had long advocated. He now had the forces he needed. But Westmoreland's hopes for a great campaign to follow up his victory at Khe Sanh were soon dashed. In the United States, by the spring of 1968, American public opinion had turned sharply against the war in Vietnam. The shock of the Tet Offensive had led many to believe that the U.S. would have to withdraw sooner or later. Under severe pressure, President Johnson had promised to search for a negotiated peace. He ruled out any big troop increases and any widening of the conflict. In June 1968, General Westmoreland approved the destruction of the Khe Sanh combat base. The president's decision not to widen the war had meant there could be no offensive into Laos. Nor was the base needed for defense, as there were now strong and highly mobile American forces in the area. In any case, as both sides were slowly beginning to realize, even as the battle had raged at Khe Sanh, the war had changed out of all recognition.